Today on The Explainer, we are digging into a really fascinating quirk of the AI tools that so many of us use every single day. Turns out they might have a secret, kind of optimistic agenda that is quietly shaping all of their answers.
Have you ever had this happen? You go to an AI and you ask it something like, hey, what's a typical number of hours to exercise each week? Or how long is a normal wait time for customer service? And the answer that comes back, it just feels a little off, right? It feels less like the messy reality we all know and more like, well, an aspiration. Almost too good to be true.
Well, if you've ever felt that, you're not imagining things. According to some fantastic new research, this is a real systematic behavior. Large language models, LLMs, have this hidden bias, a sort of idealism that is constantly pulling the answers they give away from the statistical average and yanking them towards what is considered ideal.
So, to really get this, we need to look at what researchers believe are two competing forces at play. Inside, you could say, the mind of an LLM. Okay, so let's break this down. On one side, you've got what are called descriptive norms. You can just think of this as the raw data, the statistical truth. It's the world as it actually is. You know, the actual average number of sugary drinks people consume a week. Then, on the other side, you have prescriptive norms. This is the value judgment, the idea of what's good or desirable or ideal. It's the world as we think it should be, like the ideal number of sugary drinks you should have.
The researchers have this perfect analogy for it. Think about the concept of a teacher. Now, the descriptive norm, the average reality, might be the actual, competence level of all the teachers out there. But the prescriptive norm, our idea of a prototypical teacher, that's almost always someone who is an amazing teacher. Our very concept of teacher is already loaded with an ideal. And here is how the researchers visualize that whole theory. When an LLM goes to generate an answer, it starts with the statistical average, the reality of the situation. But it also feels this gravitational pull from the ideal. So the final answer it actually spits out gets dragged away from that true average, shifting it a little bit closer to that perfect world. And that little shift, that's the idealism bias in action.
Okay, so this is a really compelling theory, but how on earth do you actually prove it? Well, this is the cool part. The researchers designed this incredibly clever series of experiments to isolate this exact effect.
First, they came up with a totally made-up hobby they called glubbing. This is just brilliant because it means the AI has zero preconceived notions about it. Then, they fed the AI data with a really clear statistical average for glubbing hours. But, and this is the key, they also attached a grade to each data point. They created an ideal, making either more glubbing good or less glubbing good. And finally, they just asked the AI, hey, give me a sample number of glubbing hours. And the results were just wild. So on the left, you see the LLM consistently skewed its answers toward whatever ideal it was taught. But here's the real kicker. On the right, you see the results from humans who were given the exact same test. The pattern is almost identical. This suggests the idealism bias isn't just some weird machine quirk. It's actually mirroring a cognitive shortcut that we humans use all the time.
Okay, so it works for a fictional hobby, like glubbing. That's one thing. But what about in the real world? Does this idealism bias pop up for concepts the AI already knows about from its massive training data?
The researchers tested this on a huge scale, and the answer was a loud and clear yes. So take something like customer service wait times. The AI knows the average wait time is pretty long, but the ideal is, of course, very short. So its sample answer gets pulled down towards that short ideal time. The exact same thing happens with sugary drinks. And for exercise, it's the reverse. The answer gets pulled up from the average toward the higher, more ideal number. This bias is literally everywhere. And just how widespread is it? Well, in a test of 444 real-world concepts, the AI's answer got pulled toward the ideal in 304 of them. That is nearly 70% of the time. This is not some random fluke. It appears to be a fundamental feature of how these models work. And here's something that is absolutely critical to understand. This isn't some flaw that gets fixed as models get bigger and more powerful.
It actually gets worse. This table shows that as models get larger, from Llama 3's 8 billion parameter model all the way up to its 70 billion, the bias becomes more significant. And look at this, the instruction-tuned models, the ones that are fine-tuned to be helpful assistants like ChatGPT, show an even stronger bias than the raw pre-trained versions. So you might be thinking, okay, an AI that's a bit of an idealist, that almost sounds harmless, maybe even charming. But what happens when we start relying on these models for really high-stakes decisions?
This quote from the paper really brings the stakes into sharp focus, because when this kind of idealism starts to creep into critical fields like medicine, the consequences can be incredibly serious. So researchers tested a scenario where an LLM was asked to suggest patient recovery times. What they found was that the AI's ideal recovery time was almost always shorter than the statistical average. And because of that, when it was asked for a typical recovery time, its answer was biased toward being shorter in 26 out of 35 different medical scenarios. And that could lead to things like premature patient discharge, creating very, very real safety risks.
And there is one last really fascinating difference they found between our ideals and an AI's ideals. See, when you ask a human for an ideal number, we tend to be pretty realistic. The ideal number of sugary drinks a week? Humans say maybe 2.4. But for an LLM, the ideal is often absolute. It's 0. The ideal number of lies to tell per week? 0. It has this kind of moral absolutism that's very, very different from human nuance.
So what we've learned is that our AIs aren't just neutral calculators spitting out the most likely text. They are shaped by a hidden set of ideals. And that leaves us with a huge question as we weave them deeper and deeper into our lives. We know they have ideals now, but are they the right ones? As we build these powerful new minds, who exactly gets to decide what they believe is perfect?